What's up, guys? Welcome to Rotor Riot. I'm Jeff Warda, you might know me as VORT3X, and we're building the Bando Slayer here today, boys and girls. It's my signature frame, made by Detroit Multi-Rotor. That's what we're using. Then we're going to use the DYS F4 Pro Flight Controller V2, DYS Aria ESC's 32-bit. Of course, you know we're putting them hype train motors on it. We're going to use the Immersion RC Tramp for video. Pairing up with this Immersion RC Tramp, we're going with that Rotor Riot Edition Swift from Runcam. FreeSky RXSR receiver and some little booties, some little footsies for your motors. What do we do first? Putting the frame together, but before we do that, you gotta sticker bomb this thing. You can't have pre-cut out things that fit. That's not sticker bombing. You gotta bomb it. Just put a bunch of stickers on. So the art to sticker bombing is just stick them on there. It's not gonna matter. The more random, the better. Pro tip for sticker bombing though, don't put stickers where the parts are gonna meet together because it'll just get chewed up. Then you just cut around the edges. Better when you have a sharp blade. This is kind of dull. Well, actually, I wonder if I can use my trick. Because the carbon is sharp, sometimes you can just rub it like this and it'll actually cut the sticker. We're learning. Crazy. We're learning today. I think that's close enough. Next thing we gotta do is poke the holes out for the bolts that are gonna hold your motors on. The way I build, I always put the frame together first and then work outside in. So it's gonna be frame, motor, speed controller, flight controller, receiver, camera, then the VTX. Lay the arms out where they're gonna go. Pointy things, those are like your little motor protectors. Those are gonna go in the front and the back, like so. They're gonna be sandwiched between that guy. The bolts that hold the arms on that you're gonna put in first are the ones that stick out. Go up from the bottom, then the arm, then this guy, and a lock nut. First one's always the trickiest. After that, it's pretty easy.
Hey.
Hey, what?
Since it's cold, how does an Eskimo build a house?
I have no idea.
It glues it together!
Woo! Now that we got that, I guess we'll do the other ones too. These ones, instead of having lock nuts to hold it, it's gonna have a 10mm standoff. When you build yours, use Loctite, because there's only 2 bolts. I think any frame that only has 2, you need Loctite, or one of them's gonna loosen up. You have a lock nut here, but this one's just a standoff, so. Frame's together enough to start putting stuff onto it. We're going with the hype trains in combination with, where'd they go? Did you catch that? That was a snag. Lander pads. Yeah. If you intend to use gorgeous Rotor Riot lander pads, you're gonna need longer screws. Get yourself some 8mm M3 bolts for these guys. Get your screw ready, insert it there, line this guy up, and we're in there. Don't crank it down too much right away because you're gonna need to align it. I don't really have any tips for this. We're just screwing the motors on. For speed's sake, I think we'll just do 2 bolts per motor. I've actually used only 2 bolts per motor a lot, and it's usually okay. But then again, we're not using Loctite today because Drew doesn't have any. Use Loctite, kids. It's good for you. Now I know I don't want all this extra wire, so I'm just gonna go ahead and snip that. I like to kind of clean up the wires as I go so it's not such a mess. So what I'll usually do is cut it a little longer than I know I need it, just in case. You can always cut more, but you can't add the wire. Well, you could add the wire back, but that would be a pain in the butt, wouldn't it? We're gonna stick these ESCs down with some double-sided tape. That way, they're not moving around when you're trying to solder. It just keeps it right there in place. And then again, with the theme of trimming wires as I go, I like to clean this up a little bit too. I know that all these wires only need to go to the corners. So what I'll usually do is go a little extra further than I need. It just makes this a little easier to manage. Time to do a little stripping and soldering. Another one of my build philosophies is each little task I have to do, I do it sort of like assembly line style. Like when I have to trim these wires, I'm gonna trim all of them. And then when I solder, I'm gonna solder all of them instead of doing one at a time, if that makes any sense. Okay, now it's time to tin. So again, same thing. I'm gonna just tin everything. A little tip on tinning, you don't ever like melt onto the wire. You always want to put the iron on the opposite side as the solder, so you make sure that the wire is actually melting the solder, and that helps make sure it's like soaking into the wire. So sometimes I'll kind of like cheat it and let it touch because it helps. So clean the tip a lot, kind of nice and clean. It should always be nice and shiny and clean looking. If it's all dark and gross looking, that's why you're having to hold it on for a longer time, because the temperature, the heat doesn't transfer when it's dirty like that. Boom, motors are tin. Let's do the old speedos. Similar concept here. I usually try to not touch, try to like make sure the pad is hot enough to actually melt the solder. Now we'll attach them. So much better when you have something to hold it with. You don't have to try to prove what a man you are, that you can handle the pain of the burn. In case you didn't know, what we're doing here is we're turning that ball of solder and that ball of solder into one ball of solder. For OCD's sake, I always wire my motor wires straight across so they look nice, not crossed, and then I will adjust the rotation of the motor in software instead of doing it with the wires. So if you push too hard, let me see if I can make that happen again. Sometimes it'll spread out like this, but you can kind of push it back together. You don't really want it fanned out like that. You really shouldn't be able to see any strands at all. It should just look like a solid piece. That's close enough for me. So the other thing is just don't push too hard, let the heat do the work. It's always the last one I have problems, like every time. Like every time I say last one, it's like last motor, all the screws like not wanting to line up. Last ESC, just do the worst soldering you've ever done in your life.
Last battery of the day.
Last battery of the day. Not even mention that, you should always tin the tip too. You can't go in there dry. That really helps the heat transfer. It's time to mount the flight controller. We're gonna use these little soft mounts. What do you call these things? Grommets? Gummies? Call it what you want. Pretty simple, you just kind of push it through. Just kind of nudge one side of it through and then pull it through on the other side. To mount the flight controller, you are going to need 4 12mm screws. We put that through the hole. We're gonna add a nut to that. This is a nylon nut. We're going to use this to get some space off of this board, give the flight controller some space, and also to hold these screws in place. Doesn't have to be super tight.
So, but with that recess, why bother putting the nuts?
Well, for one, like I said, because otherwise, if I didn't use the nuts on the bottom, once I do this, all my screws just fell out. So it holds them there, and it gives you space, because if you were to put this flat down, maybe this one might be okay, but I think your USB port,
oh, right,
you can't have it totally flush down. And here comes the flight controller. So again, going with the theme of do all the stuff together, I'm going to tin every part of this board that I am going to solder to. Notice how I said solder? That's for you people outside of this country. But I'm going to say solder for the rest of the video. You get one solder. All right, I'm going to refer to the diagram to see what other pins I'm going to need on this guy. So we are tinning these, I call them through holes, Drew calls them pinholes, but I never actually go through the hole. I always just tin it and set the wire on top. So where are we at here? RX1, ground. We're getting ready to solder these ESCs to the flight controller, so it's time to do a little hillbilly measuring. It's very crucial to get the positive to the positive and the negative to the negative, so take your time on that, make sure that's right. I line it up just a hair longer than I need it. Just a little bit extra long. Yeah, actually I do kind of like the layout of this new board. I kind of like that at all.
You go straight to the corners?
Yeah, and that you don't have to cross them. I was using the older version, so this would kind of go here and then curve back. It's kind of nice that it's a straight shot. This takes a bit of dexterity in the fingers to strip these without cutting through. Okie smoky. Let's tin these babies up. Okie dokie. Moving on to the next step here, which is actually soldering to the flight controller. This is the part that kind of concerns me because I still need to get that. Let me just put the nuts on now. Usually I would do it after because I don't want to melt them, but this has to kind of go over them. I probably should have done this. Yeah, this is the part of the board I'm not in love with because it goes right over the nut. So that means if I don't know. Yeah, so you may need an additional 4 M3 nylon nuts for the top. It's like all these are just gonna barely reach, but it's okay. It's time to attach the signal wire. I'm cutting it close here. Not a lot of extra room. Should have cut them a little bit longer. It would have been on the safe side. First time using this flight controller. Another little tip I do is I like push down on that, because otherwise when you go to put that, it's not touching. Give it a little push down, much better, and then it'll kind of soak in together as you solder it. Looks good to me. Here's a little update. Here's where we're at. We got the frame put together. We've got the motors installed. Then we threw on the ESCs, chunked in the flight controller, and soldered up all the ESCs to the flight controller. So what are we gonna do next? Let's put the receiver on it. The VTX is going to get mounted in the back section. The receiver is gonna get stuck on top of that. So I'm not gonna stick it down yet, but I'm going to hook up the wires. Speaking of which, with this FreeSky RXSR, it's a little different. Look what they did here which it's kind of cool, but I don't think we're ever going to use this. If you look at it, we have a S-bus in and a S-bus out. What the heck is that for? Basically what you can do is you can have multiple receivers on this, and it's for redundancy. If one fails, then the next one will take over. So the S-bus in is from another receiver. We're talking from the receiver to the flight controller, so that means we're going to use the out. We are not going to use S-bus in. That is for redundancy, to have multiple receivers hooked up in line. What we're going to use is the S-bus out, because we're going out from the receiver to the flight controller. So this is the cable you get with it. Color coded as always. Black is always your ground. Red is always your positive. Going by this, it goes ground, 5 volt. S port means smart port, we're not going to use that. And then S bus out, so ground, 5 volt, skip over the S port, don't need it. And then S bus out. White is your S bus in. I'm not going to use these guys, so I'm just going to snip them now. Whenever I put these connectors in, instead of just blindly jamming them, I always take a look, because you'll notice the pins are not centered. They're always going to favor the top or the bottom. So I look at that, and then I look at my connector. So I look at the pins, I look at the connector, and then I make sure that they are both the same. So that would be this orientation. That way you don't get it wrong and bend up your pins. Let me confirm where this is gonna go. Always refer to your manual when wiring these things up, because it'll tell you where stuff has to go. I've probably built, like I said, 100 quads. Every single time I build one, I always look at this, because if you get something wrong, then you just screwed up, and you didn't need to. All you had to do is just follow along what this says. S-bus, that's our guy. Ground and 5 volt. So that's these guys. So I'm going to measure out about how much wire I need. Snip, strip. Let's get that going. Do a little twist of the wire. Take care of those stragglers. I think I'm gonna give these a little twist. Pro tip for these situations, I have to solder 2 pins that are sort of right on top of each other. So I want to make sure I do the inside one towards the center of the board first, because otherwise the first wire would be in the way of the second wire. So plan ahead which one you're going to do first. The good old Lady and the Tramp. We are going to be using this cable, and the wires that we're going to use, we're going to use the red one. The red one is your input power. 2 to 6S LiPo in the first wire, the red one. We're going to need that ground. Definitely going to have that. This orange one is a 5 volt out. I'm not going to power anything off of this, so I'm going to snip that. I'm going to clean that up later. Yellow is the signal wire. Definitely going to need that. White is the telemetry wire. All right. White is telemetry. We're going to keep that. And then this is the audio wire. I'm not going to use that. I don't need audio. That's annoying to me. Can you hear that? That's what it sounds like. My favorite stuff, double-sided tape. You got to have it. She's going to go just like that. Once again, back to this. I'm going to use bat power, they call it. So I'm going full power, not 5 volts. Let's get a little measurement here. Cut it just a little extra long. VTX gets the video out, camera gets the video in, because the camera is going into the VTX and then out back to you. I'm gonna strip these babies. Again, looking at the diagram not to get this wrong. And also remembering our do the inside holes first trick. This is the telemetry wire so that you can control your VTX via the Betaflight OSD. I hooked it to the TX3 pin. TX3 or TX6. You may be using TX6 if you're using Spectrum, because you're going to use TX3 for your receiver. And what a beautiful thing that is, right? Being able to switch your channel through the flight controller, that's amazing. Everything, all of this, a lot of this would not be possible without the new stuff, because this thing is going to be like super slammed low, and there's no way I wouldn't be able to do that if I had to get there and push a button to switch my channel, and I wouldn't be able to put only, if I didn't have a all-in-one flight controller like this, it would have to be taller. Okay, VTX is done. Okie dokie, camera time. Ooh, look at that beauty. And this guy is gonna be roughly that long. We are almost done. We're gonna go ground 5 volt video in. Boom, now we got our, I think that's, oh yeah, last thing to solder is this guy. We'll get more into it. I'm just gonna use this to kind of line things up. This is like a little tail piece that will hold this into place. So I just wanna make sure that this is gonna be about the right length, because I want it to stick up about this much. So I'm gonna cut these just a little bit, just about that much off. We're gonna tin up these main power leads here. Get some solder flowing in there. When I'm tinning bigger wire like this, I like to kind of look at it, because if you can focus, you got a nice blob of solder on one side, but on the other side you can still see the strands. So to me, that's not really properly tinned. I like to see solder all the way around, so I'll flip it over and hit it from the other side. This is the one you really don't want to get wrong. You want to get this one right. This is an important one right here. Definitely want the black one on the minus side. Kind of crucial. This one I'm going to kind of have to give it a little push, because it's tricky to get this stuff. Full power. Give it all she's got for these thicker gauges. Sometimes you kind of get this flowing a little bit first. That helps, and then bring this in. Another thing you should be trying to do at least is to kind of get the iron where it's touching both parts. Sometimes you can just go from the top and it'll get hot enough that it melts all the way, but if it's not, try to get a little bit of both, so you're heating up both parts. There we go. This one's much better. This is where it gets a little complicated on this frame, but I think it's worth it, because you have so many different lengths of standoffs. So these are 10s. I think this is a 7. This is a 16. I don't even remember what this is. Oh, and there's one more part we need. It's a little bumper slash spacer piece. This is gonna go in the front, which I should have sticker bound. I'll sticker bound this right now, because that's gonna show. All right, back to what I was saying. At this point, it gets a little complicated. Not really, but a little bit. Tallest standoffs, those are in the front. Those hold the camera. Next size is in the back. And then the smallest ones are the fronts. This is a split level design. So towards the front, in the very front, you're gonna have 2 standoffs. In the back section of the front, you're gonna have 4. There's a screw, standoff, plate. How does this go? I don't know how to use words. You'll see. So we got the back standoffs on. Let's put the front ones on. Yeah, it's like a little extra bumper up front, and it also just brings this a little taller. Okay, what do I want to do next? I'll do the camera. These are camera mounts. Pretty simple. Here's the camera mounts. They're going to attach just like that, and we're gonna slide it onto the standoff. So let's get the hardware for the camera. It's another one of those little things in life that I appreciate, is using Allen heads on these instead of a little Phillips, because those are always tricky for me. Back in the day, all the cameras had Phillips, and it's the same tool I've been using the whole time. How convenient. Just love life right now. Just like that. Plug it in. I'm gonna double side tape the receiver down to the VTX, just like that. All right, next, we'll do the antenna, that little nugget there. What do they call it, AXI or AXII? How do you say it? Whatever you are, that's what we're gonna use today. So this guy is basically finished. You just gotta button it up now. This is the top plate. You'll notice there's a deeper cutout on one side that goes to the back, because this is gonna sandwich in like so. It's kind of nice, it holds it for you without like chafing it or anything like that. And we don't want to put these bolts in, because that's going to go through another set of standoffs. Start in the middle with this one. Whoop. We're on the home stretch. We're almost there. Now we need some slightly longer screws, because this part is going to go through the printed part. Pull that up, slide that in the slot, line it up. Okay. Now we got to deal with these antennas. The receiver antennas I'm going to feed through this way. These 4 holes are for zip ties to mount your antenna. You want to hook these zip ties onto something strong. Like, I wouldn't put it on that. I want it on the metal so it doesn't rip. So probably right there. A little something like that. Pew! More zip ties. We are gonna wrap this guy around the arm. This is what we're gonna mount our receiver antennas to. Tuck this under the wire. I'm gonna measure the zip tie to the end of the antenna. Let me give it a little bit extra. Be careful not to cut your antenna. The length matters. Let's find the right size heat shrink. This looks like it'd be perfect. Oh yeah. Finishing touches now. We are so close to being done. Let's heat shrink these babies. Cool. All right, last piece. We need extra long screws for this part. For these guys, you don't want to tighten this all the way, because then you won't be able to thread this into that standoff, because it's going to get stuck. So you keep it a little bit loose, and then it'll all tighten up together. That's good. Oh yeah. 2 screws and we're done. That's all she wrote. That's your Bando Slayer.
So what happened?
Just kidding. We're not done yet, because no build video would be complete without forgetting something. You gotta have straps if you wanna keep your battery on your quad. So, and with it being that tight, you're not getting them straps in there with it on. So you have to do it ahead of time. Down through here, up through here. Okay. Let's put her back together. And this, if this happens, if you're trying to tighten this down and it gets tight, loosen it up a little, turn this so that it's not binding at the bottom. As long as you have a little gap, it should work. Okay, as we wrap it up, I'd like to thank you for watching. If you have any suggestions for how this could have been better, leave a comment, let me know.
It could not have been better.
You think this is as good as it gets?
Oh yeah.
This is the best build video of all time?
Ever!
If you guys think this is the best build video ever done, leave a comment. If you think it's the worst video ever, leave a comment.
You're gonna have to come back and chat with
Oh,
them.
I'll be there. I'll be there.
You'll be there?
Yeah.
You're not gonna be like...
If there's any haters, I'm gonna dab on them. It's been a great time. I've enjoyed hanging out here with you guys, building drones. All good things come to an end, and this is that end. It's over. That's a Bando Slayer. Get you one of these at the Rotor Riot store and go slay some bandos, kids.